Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Karishma Govender, and I'm the General Counsel at the National Empowerment Fund. I would like to welcome you to our Women in Business webinar today, hosted by the NEF. In the room today, we have some of our presenters, Zetu Kulu, who is our legal advisor at the NEF, Ms. Nomfundo Fakudze, a senior investment associate in the Umnoto Fund, Ms. Lindiwe Shikwambana, a senior investment associate in our Rural and Community Township Fund, and Ms. Simosini Ngwenya, who is our investment principal in our Strategic Projects Fund. We also have a host of other attendees from the National Empowerment Fund on the line. And everyone is here today to present to you, to answer your questions, and to interact with you on the group. So I would just like to open by, explaining the purpose of today. We've invited you all here today to really engage with us as the NEF, as a funder, and also to just explain to you what exactly it is that the NEF offers, to see whether we can meet a need that you may have in terms of your business, in terms of funding. So we are going to take you through our processes at the NEF. What do we offer as an organization? How do you then apply for the offering? What do you need to get ready if you are looking for funding for your business, and take you through almost a step-by-step guide to give you some assistance in the process. So the various presenters will take you through all of that information, and at the end we will have a Q&A session where you're welcome to ask questions and raise any queries that you may have. And we're also going to have an exciting testimonial from one of our clients that has been funded by the NEF, and we'll introduce her later on in the session. So I just want to start off by saying that in this Women's Month, the NEF has done a lot to just engage the various women in business, reach and find people that are running businesses, that are interested in starting businesses from across the country in all the provinces. And we've really tried to be visible and ensure that our message is heard loud and clear, because we really do support women empowerment and lead from the front. As far as I'm concerned, we really want to see more women in business and women being funded. So in saying that, we do feel that economic empowerment is really a powerful tool against poverty, and that gender equality really is a prerequisite for achieving prosperous societies. And so the participation of females in the economy is vital, because it gives us access over the resources and enables us to support our families and our households. But we find that, women really experience barriers that restrict their participation in the labor market. And as we all in the room know, these can be as a result of, traditional gender roles, unpaid work, and caring, such as caregivers and homemakers. So there's a lot of challenges that face women that are not necessarily, that don't make it easy for us to achieve the things that we do, but we do actually prosper despite all of that. And I want to refer to an extract from a book that I found really impactful when it comes to the topic of women empowerment, and why women need to be a focus of attention in terms of development and opportunities. And the name of the book, the title is A Moment of Lift, The Moment of Lift by Melinda Gates, and How Empowering Women Change the World. And this is one of the books that really changed my views. It's one of my top 3 books that I've ever read. It really changed my viewpoint on the world, gave me a new perspective, and it really opened my eyes. And this is some of what it says. For women who spend all their hours doing unpaid work, the chores of the day kill the dreams of a lifetime. What do I mean by unpaid work? It's work performed in the home, like childcare or other forms of caregiving, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and errands done by a family member who's not being paid. In many countries, when communities don't have electricity or running water, unpaid work is also the time and labor women and girls spend collecting water and gathering wood. This is the reality for millions of women, especially in poorer communities where women do a much higher share of the unpaid work that makes a household run. On average, women around the world spend more than twice as many hours as men on unpaid work, but the range of the disparity is wide. In India, women spend 6 hours a day doing unpaid work, while men spend less than one. In the US, women average more than 4 hours of unpaid work every day. Men average just 2.5. In Norway, women spend 3.5 hours a day on unpaid work, while men spend 3. There's no country where the gap is zero. This means that on average, women do 7 years more of unpaid work than men over their lifetimes. That's about the time it takes to complete a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And it further says, as women gain rights, families flourish, and so do societies. That connection is built on a simple truth. Whenever you include a group that's been excluded, you benefit everyone. And when you're working globally to exclude when you're working globally to include women and girls who are half of every population, you are working to benefit all members of every community. Gender equality and gender equity lifts everyone. From high rates of education, employment, and economic growth to low rates of teen births, domestic violence, and crime, the inclusion and elevation of women correlate with the science of a healthy society. Women's rights and society's health and wealth rise together. Countries that are dominated by men suffer not only because they don't use the talent of their women, but because they are run by men who have a need to exclude. Until they change their leadership or the views of their leaders, those countries will not flourish. Understanding this link between women empowerment and wealth and health of societies is crucial for humanity. As much as any insight we've gained in our work over the past 20 years, this was our huge missed idea. My huge missed idea. If you want to lift up humanity, empower women. It is the most comprehensive, pervasive, high leverage investment you can make in human beings. And so I say that it is for this reason that the NEF takes women empowerment and economic participation so seriously. We really seek to lead this initiative from the front, driving the pace and extent of the change that we want to see. And today we are therefore opening our doors to you to engage with us, to raise your hand for support or funding, and to allow us to walk the path with you. We hope you will receive value from today's presentation, and I thank you for making the time to attend. I'll now hand over to Zetu Kulu, our first presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Karishma. Good morning, everyone. And thank you once again for availing yourselves to attend this webinar. Just a second for me. Thank you. Okay, just a minute for me. I'm just trying to make sure that you can see my face. We're just working with the video technology is failing me a little bit here. Just a minute. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for granting me a minute. As I was saying, good morning, everyone, and thank you for availing yourselves to attend our webinar. This morning, we are speaking about positioning Black entrepreneurs to drive recovery and growth. And I think the starting point really is who is the NEF? Who are we and what can we do? What is our contribution to this? So as a starting point, the NEF is established in terms of the National Empowerment Fund Act 105 of 1998. It is an agency of the DTIC, and the primary mandate of the NEF really is to promote and facilitate transformation by providing financial and non-financial support to support businesses. Just as an indication right off the bat, our investments starts from a minimum of 250,000 to 75 million. Now, the National Empowerment Fund, what do we do? How do we assess and who do we fund essentially? So as indicated, our mandate embraces the principles of the BBBE, the broad-based Black economic empowerment. And in our investments, what we primarily look at, when we're financing a business, we look at the ownership of that business, management, control, and employment equity. The NEF is very passionate about the empowerment of Black women, about job creation, and just growing different sectors as a whole. We focus, the speakers will go in depth on this later on. We focus on what we call geographic spreads. This obviously speaks to certain areas that we identify as critical in making investments in. Moving right along, as I've indicated, we are concerned primarily with investing in Black businesses. Now, the businesses that we look at, is this business owned by a Black South African citizen, and the citizen must be a permanent resident in the country. We look at the majority of the business operations, are they within South Africa? Also, there's various compliance issues that we look into when we are assessing that particular business. And as I've said, we are passionate about women empowerment and creating jobs. I think just on this one, I need to also just explain that sometimes because of the type of businesses that we support, we understand that businesses would not be 100% fully compliant. So the NEF has really a model of hand-holding and trying to assist businesses to meet the level of compliance that we need, and where we can have more or less a discussion and try to achieve some elements of the compliance at a later stage, obviously without going outside the realm of the law, we do that. So just to note that in case you are looking at this and you are thinking, what if I don't have all these requirements? You don't have to be 100%. The NEF will support you, obviously, where it is practically able to do so. Moving on to our next slide, financial support. As I've indicated, we provide both financial and non-financial support, and we focus primarily on empowering Black industrialists, rural communities, and women-owned businesses. And as I've indicated earlier on, our funding starts at 250,000 up to 75 million. We support key areas such as franchises, procurement, entrepreneurship, and we look at things as like liquidity, capital markets needs. We are very committed as the NEF to inclusive economic growth. And as I've indicated, with our geographic spread, we target strategic sectors also for sustainable development. But the most important thing is that we want to enable communities and empower communities to tailored financial solutions, because some of the people that we fund into are ordinarily people that a normal bank will not finance. So we try to meet communities and individuals midway, if I could put it like that. Now let's speak about non-financial support. What do we do? You will get support from the NEF right before the investment, during the investment, and after. At our pre-investment, we have a pre-investment department. This is your first point of contact when you are applying for finance. These are the people that will look at the application, and if there's anything that is needed, they will then advise and get back to you. They manage the online business plan solutions and obviously the overall administration of applications. Then we also have third-party funds. These will also be explained on later on in depth. So these are the funds that the monies are not necessarily monies that are coming from the NEF's book, but are coming from other third parties. So we get into third-party agreements with various stakeholders. And this is solely obviously to support businesses and communities and to make sure that we have a far wide reach than we would ordinarily have just as the NEF as one entity. Non-financial support at post-investment. If you remember, I said we support you before the investment, during the investment, and after. We have a post-investment department. This is the department that will primarily communicate with you after we have disbursed any monies that need to be disbursed. They can even assist at that department with any back office support. They will give mentorship support. They will look at if there's a struggle with maybe meeting some undertakings that would have been required in terms of our finance agreement. This is the department that will assist. We understand that although the whole point of going into business is for the business not to fail, certain things happen and business go into distress. And we need to perhaps look into our agreements or the arrangements that we have. We then have a department for turnaround, workaround, and restructuring. These look at, for example, if we had timelines that were obviously in our finance agreements, and these timelines cannot be met for one reason or the other. This department looks into how can we find midway again? How can we get a plausible solution if there's some level of restructuring that needs to be done, how this can be achieved effectively without necessarily losing the investment or the business. I will now hand over to Nomfundo, who will take us through specifically the types of funds that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Zethu. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nomfundo Fagutse. I am with Umnoto Fund. We'll take you through the second leg of the presentation, just going through the financial and non-financial support that Zethu had articulated. On the financial support, we have 5 specialist funds within the National Empowerment Fund, one being the Strategic Projects Fund, which focuses really on early stage funding, looking at venture capital funding structures to increase capacity on manufacturing and industrialization in South Africa. The funding there is up to 75 million rands. The second fund is Umnoto Fund that purely looks at your corporate finance activities, looking at acquisition finance, new venture finance, expansion finance, and capital markets. And the funding ranges from 2 million to 75 million within Umnoto Fund. And then looking at Imbewu Fund, which is the smaller fund within the NEF that focuses more on SMMEs in giving them franchise funding, procurement funding, procurement funding, contract or purchase order funding, and we're looking at funding starting from 250,000 to 15 million rand. And then we have the Rural Township and Community Development Fund, where we look to fund businesses in rural and township areas that have an element of community development. In terms of the products there, it mirrors the products of Umnoto Fund, and the funding ranges from 1 million to 50 million rand. And then we have what we're all here about today, the Women Empowerment Fund, which really supports businesses that are women-owned and led. It cuts across the four funds that I've spoken about, and the products range from about 250,000 to 75 million rands in that regard. Thank you. In terms of the non-financial support, I don't think I'll touch on that as Zetu has gone into that lengthily, but just to highlight that the third-party funds really have been, an important division in the NEF in that they've helped us to stretch our balance sheet in the areas that we reach in terms of funding and the multiplier effect. We've raised funding through national government, the provincial government, and other corporates such as Transnet and DBSA, where we co-finance those fundings and the grants that we receive from third-party funds with NEF funding. Just to demonstrate the difference between a development finance institution and commercial banks, I think we understand as the National Empowerment Fund, as a DFI, that ours really is to fund market failures in the industry, looking at the appetite that banks would not ordinarily have on the transactions that would be faced by Black South Africans. So we look to start small businesses with startup finance, obviously knowing that there's a high level of risk there, and we look to absorb those risks, and the third-party funds actually help us in trying to fund those transactions. Our funding is not security-based or collateral-based, so we don't go outside the company to look for security. It is mostly demonstrated by the cash flows within the entity, and if those cash flows can repay the NEF loans. In terms of the loan to value, I know banks will look at strictly between 70-30 LTVs or 60-40. The NEF is not prescriptive in own contribution, and we take every application on a case-by-case basis. In terms of our funding horizons, we do look at the needs of a company. If we have to include moratoriums that will allow the company to build up the relevant cash flows that can enable it to afford the loans, we will look at that, and also with the terms of the funding years that we would get into. We have our post-investment support, which is, as Zetu has said, when we are done funding a transaction and it's dispersed, it goes to our post-investment unit. And if we find gaps in those transactions that we do, then we prescribe mentorship programs that post-investments would then assist our entrepreneurs in that regard. And then based on the third-party funds as well, is that they also enable us, because I think when we're looking at funding most of these businesses, there's always issues around market leakages or access to market, and therefore that the third-party funds then assist in us packaging transactions that will then gain that access to market that will enable our entrepreneurs to repay our loans. And then obviously banks are very prescriptive and very strict when it comes to credit records. We do look at transactions or individuals that would be listed in some in credit bureaus, but obviously we take that on a case-by-case basis, obviously being responsible and understanding what created that listing and what remedies would be in place after that. The sectors that the NEF wouldn't fund include certain industries, so we wouldn't fund industries or businesses that want to dabble in gambling or taverns or the sale of alcohol. And in terms of luxury property developments, I think we have a focus as a DFI is that we look at to fund social housing, student accommodation, affordable housing, things that will touch on, the ordinary South African. Speculative transactions is something that we wouldn't do, that will go for exploration of minerals, because we wouldn't know what we're going to find when you do an exploration, or if you're building developments that are not yet ready to be taken up by the market, or there are no bonds that are available at that stage, we wouldn't look to fund those. And then people also under debt review, we wouldn't fund that as the National Empowerment Fund, as well as the manufacturing and supply of ammunition. The sectors, however, that we'd like to focus on are on Black industrialists, which would then create new capacity in terms of manufacturing and industrial capacity in the country. We have funded up to 900 million projects and producing 3,600 jobs over 4 billion that we've leveraged of third-party funding. In the support of SMMEs, we've disbursed over 1.6 million to 454 small and medium enterprises across the country. With the township and rural economy, we've funded over 2.1 billion in rural and township areas, and we currently have a township and rural fund that is currently running at the moment, which will see that activity increase. On the property side, as I've said, we look to fund property assets that speak to the demographics of the nation. So looking at social housing, student accommodation. In the property sector, we've funded up to 372 million, leveraging 600 million from third-party funds. And construction, we have funded in excess of 785 million, producing about over 6,000 jobs, which 29% has benefited Black women entrepreneurs. On the tourism side, I think most of our portfolio, when you look at the transactions that we funded women, would be from this portfolio. We've disbursed about 251 million in the sector, leveraging off grants from the Department of Tourism as well. I've spoken to affordable and social housing and student accommodation. I think what we are leaning towards now and trying to gain traction on is in the agro-processing space, and we've funded up to 316 million to date in that space, and we'd like to see the NEF doing more in agro-processing and in energy. In terms of the NEF's performance to date, I hope you can see the diagram there. We've approved close to 2,000 transactions valued at 15.6 billion across the country. We've disbursed 10.9 billion, or about 11 billion, to Black businesses since inception. Of that, we have 6.36 billion that's been repaid by investees, which is important to say that we offer loans. So those have to be repayable so that we can fund the next pool of entrepreneurs. In that while, we have produced over 140,000 jobs, which 90,000 would have been brand new jobs into the economy. Through our pre-investments, we funded over 8,000 entrepreneurs that have attended 1.1 seminars since the program started in 2012. So why do we fund women? And I think Karishma went to length when opening with that beautiful quotation from Melinda Gates' book, is that women have been at the periphery of everything, of the economy, of politics. We've seen social degradation, and for us to uplift women, the NEF started funding or focusing on a women empowerment fund since for about 10 years now. And we've seen from the book that we have that the deals that we funded that are women-led and women-owned seem to have the culture of repaying, and we've seen that we've been getting repayments from that book. And as citizens, as women as well, I mean, we are the majority, and we need to participate in the economy that benefits us. And yes, and here we are today. And through research, we've seen that companies that have a greater share of women in their boards seem to be performing up 20% above industry average. So that is the NEF's KPIs from 2019 to date. I think here I'm going to focus on, I have mentioned that we have had a concerted effort to fund women as the National Empowerment Fund since probably over 10 years ago. And as you can see at the bottom, these are transactions. This is a percentage of the deals we've approved and dispersed that have gone to the hands of women. So we've been above 30%, only dipping in 2021, 2022, where we've met and exceeded the targets that we had of 30%. And we look to improve that, and hopefully from this webinar, we'll get more transactions that we can disperse and reach our 40% mark. The sectors spread around women-owned businesses in the National Empowerment Fund. I think 39% of those you'd see in the wholesale and retail trade, which is mainly on the petroleum and franchise side, followed by financial services. And looking at agriculture, we're sitting at about 4%, which is something that we'd like to see grow. As I've said, that we want to focus on agro-processing. So in terms of the market failures, as I've presented the difference between commercial banks and development finance institution is that of limited capital. So we seek to solve the solution by providing funding solutions from a minimum of 250,000 rands to 75 million for startup expansion and equity transformation purposes. Where we find gaps, as I said, in management skills, be it financial or marketing or technical expertise, we then ensure that we note that in our handovers to post investments, and then that's when the businesses will be capacitated with the support that particular business would need. Access to affordable capital. I think we have our empowerment dividend where we look at the different spheres in which our transactions lie, be it geographic spread, is the women participation, is the youth, those that are living with disabilities. Then when looking at that model, then we come up, you can come up with very great pricing compared to our commercial banks, and also the reduced need for collateral from the transactions that we fund. Another, I think, what we've seen with most of the transactions that we get from women-led businesses is that of inaccurate information. Sometimes, the quality of the business plan is not up to standard, and therefore how we try to assist those transactions is through our pre-investment units that will then look at mentorship support, incubator, and technical assistance to get those business plans and the relevant information to scratch. And also we have a business online toolkit that you can interact with in the different official languages in the country. Thank you. I think my presentation ends here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone in the room. Thank you very much for joining us in this presentation. I will be taking you through the product offering from the Rural and Community Development Fund, also covering a couple of our third-party funds, including tourism as well as alternative energy. The focus of the Rural and Township Development Fund is really to support businesses within these areas to start up, scale up, as well as to create jobs. The fund in itself has been capitalized with 300 million. That is split between SME funding as well as co-op funding. 50 million rand of the 300 million has been ring-fenced for cooperatives in this instance, And the beauty of this fund is that it allows us to blend 50-50 grant, 50% grant as well as 50% loan. The 50% concessionary loan with a rate of 0 to 5%. I think the beauty of the NEF is that we are able to leverage of these third-party funds and de-risk projects as well as businesses such as primary agriculture through the adoption of this SME Rural and Township Development Fund. The fund does seek to increase employment and create participation for women, youth, and people living with disabilities. The qualifying criteria for the SME Rural and Township Development Fund in general is looking to support businesses that are in a rural and township area or within a 5-kilometer radius, projects and businesses that are going to create sustainable jobs, the localization of businesses, to looking to increase localized inputs, as well as transformation of various industries. Ms. Fagutse mentioned that we are targeting agro-processing through the manufacturing and primary agriculture, particularly through these funds. The qualifying criteria for cooperatives. Cooperatives can qualify for funding between 250,000 to a maximum of 2 million rand. The cooperatives must be registered and in good standing. All our applications are based off of invoices and quotations that you would have provided in your application. Understand the next speaker will go through the various checklists as well as how to compile your application to the NEF. These funds for the SME Rural and Township Development Fund can be utilized for working capital, for operational inputs, for purchase of equipment, stock, as well as acquisition of tools of trade. On the SME qualifying criteria, much similar to that of cooperatives, the difference here is that SMEs qualify between 250,000 to a maximum of 5 million. They must be an SME that is registered, comply with relevant statutory requirements, be registered with SIPSI, as well as in good standing with SARS. Once again, the funding is a blend of 50% grant, 50% concessionary loan. With this 50-50 split, it's important for us to emphasize that applicants cannot come to us and apply for simply the grant portion. It is a package deal, 50% grant, 50% loan. To make an example of this, if you're looking to apply for a investment of 300 million into an agro-processing plant, 1.5 million of that will be a grant, 1.5 million will then be a concessionary loan, priced at between 0 to 5%. Once again, the NEF general criteria is that we are looking to fund Black businesses in these areas, with shareholding being primarily Black individuals. As the Rural and Township Development Fund, we are looking at businesses in the retail space, personal services, transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, as well as tourism, just to look at some of the businesses that are in these sectors. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just an example of some of the businesses we have funded. Under the retail space, we're looking at grocery stores. I'll go into detail into the spaza shop offering that we do have. We've got petrol stations, restaurants that we have funded, butcheries. Under personal services, we've looked at barber shops, funeral parlors, construction, and alteration businesses. With our manufacturing, we are looking at food processing, clothing and textile industries. We do participate in ecotourism, adventure tourism, as well as accommodation upgrades and renovations. Once again, the primary focus of the RTCDF fund really is to create sustainable jobs in these various industries. We have gone into further detail here. At the agro-processing level, we are looking for primarily food security, looking at focusing on food security, food and beverages, whether it be herbs, vegetables, leafy greens, animal production with your abattoirs. If you're looking on the primary agriculture side, we're looking at poultry farming, beef production. In our tourism space, in my next slide, I will cover our partnership with the Department of Tourism and the benefits of that TTF fund. We have the fortunate advantage of being in touch with the DTIC, where we have the MSAP fund, that is also a concessionary fund, where we're funding businesses at a rate of 2.5%. These are businesses operating in clothing and textile, wood production, furniture manufacturing, as well as food packaging businesses. In our property development space, we do have product offerings for the development of and the construction of shopping centers. As Ms. Fagutse had mentioned, we also do participate in accommodation in the space of student accommodation, as well as that of affordable housing. Just to cover our product offering and its classifications, we as the Rural Fund are mandated to cover transactions from 1 million to 50 million, whether it be a new venture, acquisition finance, or expansion capital, with the minimum requirement being that the business must be 51% Black owned. We do strongly encourage women ownership, youth ownership, as well as people living with disabilities. Just to reiterate, our fund is a blended funding model that has 50% concessionary loan, 50% grant. This specific rural SME fund has a maximum of 5 million. We can go up beyond the 5 million using other products that the NEF does have in its arsenal. So if the project, to make an example, if the project is sitting in a rural Limpopo, we're looking to create an agro-processing plant that is going to cost, for example, 15 million rand. We can use 5 million from this rural and township fund. That would be 2.5 grant, 2.5 concessionary loan. The remaining 10 million would then be funded through our MSAP fund at that concessionary rate of 2.5%. This is just to make an example of how the NEF has various products that can be put together to meet your need as an entrepreneur. We have partnered with the DTIC together with SIDFA to bring together a product offering specifically addressing the challenge of spaza shops. The spaza shop fund is currently being rolled out in partnership with SIDFA. We understand that applications are currently being assessed and processed through this fund to ensure that spaza shops are owned by South Africans, owned by Black South Africans, and operated in a manner that is compliant. So a portion of the funds do go to compliance in this fund and ensuring that those businesses are operating, as Zetu mentioned, within the rules of South Africa. Another program that we are currently rolling out is what we call our aggregator model. This is what we are using for our small scale farmers. We are using this. We have piloted the program. We started in Limpopo using the Hosiami fresh produce market. We have onboarded 65 small scale farmers that are now supplying the big Hosiami fresh produce market, creating 1,200 jobs in this instance. We are looking for to have a greater impact across the country and looking to replicate this model in various provinces. We also have what is the BB Quick Shop model, where we have partnered up with a large cash and carry, BB cash and carry, if I'm not mistaken, and using this model to onboard and create 50 new spaza shops, creating over 150 jobs with this model. So these are just a couple of examples that we are rolling out countrywide. As mentioned in our presentation, that we have partnered with the Department of Tourism, and they've also given us concessionary funds that we are able to deploy in the tourism sector. We're looking to fund businesses in accommodation, adventure tourism, gastro-tourism, and once again, this is a 50-50 split with grant funding from the Department of Tourism limited to a maximum of 5 million rand. And just to make an example of this fund, if we are looking at a tourism transaction that is priced at around, let's say, 6 million rand, 50% will be grant, which is then the 3 million rand, and then the remaining 3 million will be priced at an NEF prime linked rate. If the transaction is beyond that 10 million rand mark, the limit on the Department of Tourism grant is 5 million. So to make an example of this, if we're doing a transaction for 15 million rand, you'll qualify for a grant of 5 million. The remaining 10 million will be at a prime linked rate. We also have the privilege of being custodians of an alternative energy fund. This fund is primarily to address the issues of load shedding as well as to reduce the cost of operations for our investees. This fund, you can qualify for up to 5 million rand to greenify your project. Not just solar, we're also looking at water management systems, waste management systems. So we are looking to fund projects like that. You are able to qualify for up to 5 million rand on this fund. And this specific fund can be structured between 5 to 7 years at a concessionary rate of 2.5%. Of 2%, my apologies. So the criteria being displayed currently is specifically for the Alternative Energy Fund. This is for a maximum of 5 million rand, up to 84 months at a rate of 2%. This is for all your alternative energy needs, water management needs, and waste management solutions for your business. I think this is where my presentation ends. I will now hand over to Ms. Ngwenya, who will take you through the SMME development funding.
Thank you again, Lisa. So over the years that the NEF has been in place, we identified a number of challenges in the market or gaps in the market. And this is also based on our engagements with the clientele that we have. And to respond to these gaps and challenges, the NEF has established a fund that is dedicated specifically to small to medium enterprises. And this fund is called the Imbewu Fund. The fund was created to support businesses that are specifically majority Black-owned. This means 51%. It provides priority to businesses that are owned by youth, women, people with disabilities, and entrepreneurs in the rural area. This does not mean that the NEF doesn't fund other entrepreneurs or other Black-owned businesses. We always do fund them, except for in this specific case, we price our loans differently to support businesses that are youth-owned or women-owned or owned by people with disabilities. So we prioritize that as the NEF. This fund offers both debt and equity funding, and it's built for startups, businesses that are looking for expansion. We provide working capital support. It finances the acquisition of equipment and other improvements. The prudential limits of the fund are 15 million rand, and the start is 250,000. If the funding required by a specific business is anything more than 15 million, we are still able to support that. The sectors that are supported are a wide range of sectors outside of the sectors that were listed by Ms. Fakutse, which includes luxury properties, sim products, etc., etc. In order for any entrepreneur to get this sort of support from the NEF, they just need to submit an application with a detailed business plan and financials. I'll go through the details of the application pack in the following slides. Once we've received the submission from any entrepreneur looking to start their business, we'll then evaluate the viability of this business and the impact of the business. By impact, we also look at the geographical spread. Where is the business located? Who is it going to support? The jobs it's going to create, the people in management, etc., etc. There's a long list to look at, and obviously we'll also look at the financial viability of the submission to understand whether the business will be able to repay the loan. And then we also tailor-make the repayment terms of the loan based on the business. This just means if we see that the business does need a short payment holiday before they start repaying us, we'll put that in place. I've already discussed how we price it in terms of interest and other specific matters such as the tenure of the loan. Does it need to be longer than 60 months? Does it need to be shorter than 60 months? All those terms are tailor-made to the business. And then in terms of the fund, it has 3 different financing streams. So they have franchise finance, procurement finance, and entrepreneurship finance. So I'll start with franchise finance, and it's specifically for securing franchise licenses. So if you've identified a franchise that is credible with a strong track record in the market and are looking to participate in that space, the IMBEO fund would be able to assist you with that. The type of funding that is offered under this is specifically a term loan, meaning there's a specific time allocated to the loan and payments are required within that time. The period of this loan can be anything up to 7 years, and it's usually matched with the duration of the franchise agreements. That means if the franchise agreement is for 4 years, the term of the loan would be 4. If the franchise agreement is for 6 years, the term of the loan would be 6. That's what we usually do. And then the pricing is prime linked, and then we also consider the empowerment events that I've already highlighted. The next stream of financing is procurement finance. This is for businesses that have secured contracts or orders from their clientele, and then offer different funding instruments based on the needs of the business. So it can be a term loan, bridging loan, revolving credit facility, or a suspensive sale if they're acquiring equipment. The investment period, again, it's matched to the duration of the contract. And then the criteria there is that the contract must be viable, or the order must be viable, and it must be awarded by an entity with a strong track record in the market. One that we can also verify. The funding terms also prime linked. Lastly, the financing stream is entrepreneurship, and this is to provide capital to enterprises that seek to provide products and services in a specific niche market. I've already highlighted the instruments, which is a term loan. The term is up to 7 years. And what is important here in terms of criteria is the commercial viability and secured market. So we need to see that there's actually an existing market for this product or service that you're looking to offer. This can be verified by looking at the contracts that your clientele has provided you, or looking at the purchase orders that the clientele has provided, or a very strong independent market assessment that was done by a company or consulting company that is that has an understanding of the space. The term or the pricing is prime linked. These are just some of the franchises that we have funded in the 21 years of existence. It's anything from energy, which involves service stations, to retail, which involves your build-its and DIY depot, as well as restaurants. There's a number of them that are already listed on the screen. As you can all tell, these are businesses that have a very strong track record in the market, and that's why it was almost easier for the NEF to support these franchises. Over and above the funding that we provide for businesses, we also provide mentorship support as the NEF. So once the business has been funded, we have a unit called the post-investment units that does routine monitoring of the different investees, and they also do site visits at the investee sites. And because we understand the nature of our investees or the nature of our clients, we know that they are not always the most experienced entrepreneurs. So they need a bit of hand-holding here and there, and that's where mentorship support comes in. So through the post-investment unit, the allocated associate would then identify some gaps in the entrepreneur where they need a few skills, and then they'll onboard a mentor to support the entrepreneur. And this mentor will then try and transfer skills to the entrepreneur. And these skills can be technical, it can be financial, it can be on systems, it can be training. They also support them via turnaround and restructuring where need be. The good thing about this is that it's not at the investee's cost. The NEF covers the cost of mentorship support. So here we've listed some of the reasons that applications get declined. This list is based on feedback that has been provided to different entrepreneurs over the years. It's longer than this, but this is just a summary of the different causes for applications to be declined. Firstly, it's usually insufficient information being provided by the applicants to demonstrate the viability of the business. So here, even if the idea is good, there needs to be supporting information, whereas it's contracts or purchase order or independent market study and other items that are needed to support the case. Again, I'll go through the application pack and what needs to be submitted to ensure that when you apply to the NEF, you don't fall under this issue. The next one is the cash flow projections are not substantiated. So if the application comes in and the projections have, for example, 10 million rand per month, we would require that the applicant shows us how they plan to achieve that 10 million rand in revenue every month. Do you have a contract in place? Do you have a purchase order? Do you see a huge market gap that you are going to close? How do you give us confidence that you'll be able to generate this revenue every month? So it's important that when you are projecting your revenues, you know that you can back it up using some tangible information that you can provide to the NEF. Market viability, I've already touched on that in terms of the studies and the contracts. You must clearly identify the demand. Another issue that comes up sometimes when we have to decline applications is the entrepreneur themselves. So when we're conducting risk assessments in general in financing, the first risk that you identify is the risk on the entrepreneur when you're talking to them, when you're trying to understand them and their vision in total. So if the entrepreneur doesn't have the ability to run the business that they're applying for, it would lead us to having to decline the application. If they don't have any credibility or industry knowledge or experience in that business, we won't be able to support the business. So it's important that you have some sort of ability in the business that you're trying to apply for, or at least try to partner with people who have very strong abilities or very strong knowledge in that specific business in order to support your application. We also have identified issues with financial risk where the business maybe doesn't have assets that we can take as security, or they don't have backup cash, which would obviously lead to issues with repayment of the loan. So we won't be able to support that. Applications not meeting qualifying criteria, which we've listed earlier, we wouldn't be able to support. We also wouldn't support businesses that might cause some reputational risk to the NEF. So we try and shy away from that. And then in terms of the application checklist, let's say you've identified the business that you want to start and you're confident that this is a good market and you'd be able to make good revenues from there, and then you're ready to submit your application to the NEF. This is the checklist that you'd have to go through before you make your final submission to us. So firstly is to provide us with an application form and a business plan. So as part of the application form that we issue as the NEF, there's actually a page where we guide you on how to write a business plan and the different topics that need to be covered. So it's important that when you have your business plan ready, you just go back to that page to reference and see whether you've covered all sections that are required for a business plan to be considered as a good business plan. Okay, in an instance where there's more than one director in the company, we'd need to get an affidavit from them providing consent for you as the lead promoter to apply for funding from the NEF. If the business is existing, we'd require for the applicant to provide audited financial statements. If it's a startup, you wouldn't have that, so we wouldn't expect that from you. We also require 5-year financial projections in terms of the application. This is for both existing businesses and startups. Just to remind the audience that we said in the financial projections, the numbers or the revenues must be substantiated. So it needs to be projections that are realistic. Okay, and then in an existing business, we also require a recent management account. So if your financial year end is in February and you're submitting your applications in August, we'd require the management accounts of the different months that have come up since February. And then we'd also require personal statements of assets and liabilities showing the assets as you have in your personal capacity, as well as the liabilities that you have in your personal capacity as the applicants. Bank statements, ID copies, registration documents for FICA purposes, and then a detailed profile of the franchisor in the cases of franchise financing. And then if the business is for sale and you're looking to acquire it, we need to understand why exactly is it for sale and the sale agreement of that business. Franchise agreements in the instances of franchising are required both for existing businesses and for startups. If possible, we would require historical financials of other franchisees of similar size or franchisees that are in similar locations. This is going to help us understand the financial projections as well and see if indeed there's a market, if there's a good opportunity for the business to be located in this area. We've also listed other information that is in there that is required for the pack. In the interest of time, I won't go through it one by one, but this information is also available in the application form of the NEF. So once the applicant is ready, they must just make sure that they tick all the boxes. The NEF has presence across all provinces of South Africa. So we have listed their contact details on the screen. Their office addresses are also available on the website, so you can just check where exactly they are located if you want to pay them a visit at any point in time. We are always open to receiving applications from our entrepreneurs. There's no closing time or closing dates for different funding. You just need to approach us once you show that you are ready. With that, we've come to the end of our presentation, and then I'll hand back over to Ms. Govender. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simasini. Okay, that was that was our presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure if they are gentlemen, but that's really what we wanted to present to you today as the NEF in terms of our offering. I'm hoping that you got as much detail as you needed out of that presentation. And the messaging really being that there's a lot that the NEF does. We fund across all sectors. We fund across the different provinces. So it is really we can assist you with almost any type of business, and we are definitely open for business. So if you have the need for funding, I'm hoping that you've received some of the answers to your questions today. The other question that we often get asked, that is really a need out there in the market and that we're trying to address, is the fact that a lot of people need assistance with deal packaging, so business readiness, funding readiness. And before coming to a funder, you actually need to have a situation where you've got all your documents ready, you've got you've got your business plan at a point where it can show viability over the long term, and you have everything packaged in a way that your funding application shouldn't take too long, because the documents that the funder are looking for are given to us in the format that we require, and also that the business plan makes sense. It does show us viability and such. So I'm going to post on the Q&A platform just some details of a couple of companies that do assist with that sort of service. We ourselves don't do packaging of deals. We would need to accept those when they're in a format that we can take them forward for funding. But there are companies out there that can assist you to put them together. We can give you some suggestions as to who you can contact, but you're welcome to use anybody else if you choose to. These are not companies that are affiliated with the NEF or that are part of the NEF. They're just companies that have been doing this work and that have been sending us package deals and who understand what we are looking for. So in saying that, I hope that's another question that we answered, and you're welcome to contact them and make those arrangements. And then in the next slot, we're actually going to speak to one of our investees, and we are going to hear from her in terms of the funding that she's received from the NEF, her business and what it does. This investee, the name of the business is called NEF Cabinets, and we've got Ms. Dipuo Phakathi with us today. If you can please put your camera on as well so that the ladies can see you. We're going to quickly watch a short video telling us about NEF Cabinets, and then once we watch the video, we're going to have a little Q&A session so that you can hear from someone who's doing it, who's there already and successfully running her business and making her mark. So I'm going to ask that we play the video, and then we'll come back to you, Dipuo.
I am Dipuo Phakathi. I own a carpentry manufacturing business called NEF Cabinets. We design, manufacture and install custom-made kitchen units, built-in cupboards and office furniture. This is for the residential market, the retail market and the corporate market. I was inspired to start my business actually just from an early age. I've always had a passion for home decor, home renovations. It's a passion that I share with my mom. There's very few black women players in the kitchen industry. I had, when I searched online, there was quite a few, and I thought, wow, how interesting, why is this the way it is? And then I thought, let me try it. I heard about the NEF Furniture Fund via multiple sources actually. So I'm part of the PG Bison Enterprise Development as a beneficiary. So I remember them telling us that there is a particular fund that we could apply for, and they had a whole webinar about it with the application process. So my experience was quite broad. I didn't know what to expect. So, I started applying after obviously attending the webinar that helped. I got approved first time. So there wasn't a lot of back and forth. I also think that my preparedness helped. So my business long-term goals is that right now I'm pretty much more dominant in the Gauteng province. I want to roll out my business nationwide, or at least just have it in a couple of few provinces. I do have a lot of demand from provinces like Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Northwest. So the advice I would have is pretty much start where you are with what you have. I think a lot of us, including me, a lot of us think, you have to be at a certain level in order to start applying. You have to do this. And what I've learned is that there will never be a perfect time for you to start. So the support that ideally I would like NEF to give me is the access to market that they can assist me with. So in terms of empowerment, we basically employ women in my business. I've got about, I think 40% of my business is comprised of women in the interior design department and also in the manufacturing, the factory department. For the youth, we also have interns. I've got 2 interns from the YES program. I'm busy speaking with the DTIC for the Furniture Fund winners. They're looking for internships, and I've raised my hand to say, if you need 1 or 2 interns to be hosted, I'm open. So with the NEF fund, I'm now able to properly grow my business, and in growing my business, I'm going to need interior designers, I'm going to need administrators, and hence I'm in the process of offer to purchases. I've been trying to find a space for my retail showroom, but that's because I do plan to employ more people as the company grows. I would like to thank the NEF for the support. I think I was also at a stage in my business 6 years in. I had grown frustrated because it was not the first time that I was applying for a particular fund. But I also think I needed to get to a stage in my business where I'm ready. And I think last year when I started, being serious and putting together my application, I was at a stage where I've got the right team running the business, so I can be administrative in my business and, pay attention to the application process. So, but I would just like to thank them for also their development finance, because it's very few funders that will offer you the interest rates that I was able to get. And basically the development fund, it's not just a fund, but there's support in it, there's hand holding in it, and so I would really like to thank them from us furniture manufacturers and for making this opportunity to accessing funding. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that video. I think that gives us a nice little snapshot, and it allows those of us that haven't been to your business to also see what you do and the beautiful work. I heard that you were at Decorex and you made quite an impression. So some of us saw the work, and we didn't know that the cabinetry was such what is this? It was basically, luxury. It was very high end. So beautiful work, Dipo. I think your video has also showed us a lot about your business, but maybe I can just start by asking you, what made you interested in this space? Something that you felt that you actually had to go into as a full-time business and a full-time career path, what brought you to this industry?
Thank you. Thank you also for the opportunity to share my journey and motivate and inspire today. So for me, it was two things, right? How I ended up in entrepreneurship. The one being the passion. So I have, grown up to be extremely passionate about creating beautiful spaces or the interior design space, just basically beautiful homes. I've always, like I said, it's a passion that I share with my mother. And so I've grown up with that. I'm actually a qualified engineer by profession, having grown up in a mining town. So the career progression was very natural for me to become an engineer. So I worked in the mines for about 8 years and then moved to corporate. And when I was in corporate, I worked for a department called Enterprise Development. And I think that's where the entrepreneurship bug hit me because, in training and developing and supporting SMEs, I thought, why am I not here? Because I've got this passion that, I've always had. But really, it started when I was renovating my own house about 7 years ago. And I had a couple of kitchen and furniture manufacturers at my house consulting. And I really felt like they were boxing me, one of the rooms that I was doing, I was converting one of the rooms into a walk-in closet. And obviously, being a typical lady, I had imagined space for bags and shoes and jewelry and perfumes. And essentially, they were just asking me about folding and hanging clothes. And out of frustration, I said, why are these people not giving me a personalized solution? Why they're not asking the right questions. And I think after about seeing 3 of them, out of frustration, I went to go and find a carpenter that I partnered with. And I said, listen, I know what I want. I just need someone to implement it for me because I'm not a carpenter. And fast forward, I guess, to 6 years later, where the first 2 years of business after that experience, we operated as a side hustle, basically in the, social housing space and with small cupboards and small kitchens. And essentially we have grown to obviously targeting the mid to high income luxury kitchens and walk-in closets and bars and the lot. And now the carpenter that helped me is running my manufacturing in the factory. And yeah, we've come far in the business.
Wow. I'm so impressed with the work that you do. I really was taken aback when I saw the video and the photos from Decorex. I think your work is just fantastic. It's beautiful. And I guess, and we all wish we had closets like that. Okay. Maybe then you can tell us, what is the biggest challenge you faced as a woman entrepreneur in this space? We know that only women will know some of the struggles that that we go through to succeed, and especially in male-dominated industries, it's not easy. But we don't talk about it enough, and we feel like maybe we're the only ones that go through these things, and we're a unique case. But it helps us to hear that these are common struggles and they can be overcome.
Yes. So I think the first one, I will name 2, but the first one being, access to the networks or networking and the importance thereof. So I also early on in the business, I found myself, obviously knowing my capabilities. I would see buildings going up early and then go there with my pitch ready to say, listen, I'm Dipuo, the owner of the NEF Cabinets. I see your building or a block of flats or a development, and I can do the cabinetry, the cupboards. And, a lot of the time, it ended up in regret, or because, what I would get is that, no, we already have a team set up. We've been working with this particular team or this particular carpenter for years now. How do I trust you? How do I know you? I've been working with designers and builders and architects, and we are a team, and we've grown close, we trust each other. And I think after getting a couple of those declines with those particular reasons, I thought to myself, how about I build my own team of networks and people that I will, one day we will be able to say the same thing. I've got a team of trusted people that I work with, and we're working well together. And so, now I've become very intentional about, building my relationship with certain builders that are aligned or have similar purpose and goals to my business. Architects, interior designers, so that networking, right, is important, and growing and meeting people that are at the same pace as you, aligned to you, have the same purpose and goals as you. You might not be in the same industry, but similar ones, targeting the same customer. You are along the same value chain. In my business is the construction value chain, right? If I can get a developer, an architect, a builder, and an interior designer I can work with, then we can build something solid for our client. And we'll be able to give our client, I guess, a one-stop shop, in terms of, you just buy a stand, and then we are able to basically service you. So that's one, right? And then the next, it would be, for my industry, there's a lot of, I guess, development training and business mentoring, generic business mentoring. But if you think about it, there's very few technical mentoring. In my case, I can't think of a woman that has walked this journey and is a woman in carpentry manufacturing or cabinetry manufacturing or furniture manufacturing that I can tap into and have a couple of mentorship sessions and ask, how have you done it? How have you gotten through some of the hurdles? So I find myself having to run my business, but also learn along the way. And some of the things that I do now, I know the responsibility of taking the younger generation with me, because I never had that. I never had the technical mentor to say, listen, this is what's ahead. This is what you can prepare for. So, I always say I am the blueprint for my particular industry. And the hard part about it, obviously, is having to navigate growing a business, running a business, but also learning along the way, and failing and learning the lessons and implementing. So those are some of the challenges that you have to go through, especially in a white male-dominated industry like carpentry.
I was actually thinking to myself, you're in one of the toughest industries to break into. And the response of this is who we've always used is just what holds so many people back, and what it's the gatekeepers really of the industries.
Yes.
They will not let you in because they just don't know you. And this is the habit and the pattern that we need to break. And I'm really, trying to ask myself, how do we do that, with across the board. It's just such a prevalent thing for someone, even if they're not a newcomer, but they have experience, they're just not known to the people that, people like to keep things within a small circle, and that's a habit that we need to break, to allow for opportunities to be shared. And then I think those are really good learnings that you shared with us. Can you maybe just tell the audience, how did you first hear about the NEF, and what made you take the leap and apply for funding?
So I learned about the NEF, I guess they were advertising the furniture fund, right? So it was, on my side, it was doing the rounds on a couple of the business WhatsApps that I'm in. There's a couple of, groups, WhatsApp groups that women in business are in. And so I saw the post. I think also people knowing that I'm in the furniture industry, I got a lot of that poster being sent to me on WhatsApp. But also some of the industry associations that I'm part of. I'm part of the SAFI, South African Furniture Initiative, KSA, Kitchen Specialist Association. So being a member of some of those associations, then I got hold of the fact that a webinar will be happening in order to tell us more about this furniture fund and how we can apply for it. And so that's how I found out about it. I joined the webinar, and immediately after I joined the webinar, I started applying. I think I get a lot of questions now when, I meet people and they're like, oh, it's so good to meet someone that, the NEF has funded and whatnot. And who do I speak to? And it's funny because I always say, you don't speak to anyone. There's no particular person that I can say, speak to this person. But, the poster is there, the application forms are there, there's an email there. So that's exactly what I did. I just applied by sending all my required documentation to an email address that had been mentioned on the poster in the webinar. And about a couple of weeks after that, I got a phone call to say that a site visit will be happening at my manufacturing factory where, about 4 or 5 people from the NEF came. I think some were from legal and some was the investment associate and all of that. And that's really how the journey kickstarted for me.
I think that's really great because it's quite a brave thing to do, to just take the leap and put your ask out there and when you actually get an approval, sometimes you think, oh my word, this is a big responsibility. Am I ready for this? But well done to you. It's quite a brave leap forward. And then now that you've been funded by the NEF, can you maybe share what did the NEF's funding support or non-financial support do for you and your business? So how did it actually help you? What did it help you to achieve?
Okay, so I think to take it a step lower than that, so, I think for businesses out there, also the preparation is important, right? Because I think I had previously applied for, funding, not particularly in the NEF, because that was my first time applying, but to other DFIs. But what I actually realized is that I think being 5 or 6 years into the business at that point, I also felt like I was ready at that point. A part of me felt that when I had applied 2 or 3 years in, I didn't have a secure team to hold the business down because funding is very administrative. It will require a lot of time. And I think only after being in business, after 5 or 6 years, did I have that flexibility and that time to actually focus on my funding application. So that is one sort of, I think preparedness that people can look out for. So basically I applied, but also the other thing that we can look out for preparedness is the compliance. Compliance, it's the first set of requirements that the funders look at. So you have to have your requirements, your compliance in order and updated and all of it, not some of it. And I think even before being approved, my funding application took about 11 months for it to be approved from the beginning stage of applying. But what, as prepared as I was as an entrepreneur, or I thought I was, there was a bit of back and forth and, with the waiting both on the, I guess, NEF side and both on my side, because I think what the investment associate kept on reiterating to me is that Dipuo, your business plan and your financials have to speak one story. And if they are not speaking one story, we are not ready to go to credit and present your deal. So, and that's another thing that I learned along the way, what does it mean? So, a lot of businesses, obviously we start businesses with a generic business plan that you start off doing your initial research and then you pack it away until such a time comes that you have to apply for funding and you dust it back out again to say, let me now refine it. Now it's a live document. But for the preparation, I would also say a lot of preparation must go into the business plan, but not only the business plan alone, but the business plan must carry out the same message. So what the business plan is saying and what the numbers are saying, they must be telling one story. They must be completely aligned. Otherwise, I think that's where the whole back and forth will happen, because that's what I experienced with my application. But like I said, 11 months later, it was approved first time. And what it's been able to do for my business, is very amazing and exciting in that I got funded for vehicle and asset financing. So machinery for my manufacturing factory, where most of my old machinery were old and manual. So, I'm able to take on more clients now, I'm able to give my clients a better quality product, but also at a quicker lead time, because we all know that clients are not so patient anymore. They want things faster and quicker. We are in that era. And so I've been able to do that with the machinery and the delivery vehicles that I've been funded for, but also some working capital to establish a showroom, a retail showroom at a shopping center or a shopping mall, so that I can attract new customers and attract footprint. Not only, so we are currently based in Wynberg in Gauteng. That's where the factory is, and most of our clients naturally are from there. But obviously, because I've had a bit of demand from Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and Northwest, the retail showroom is going to Pretoria East, so that I can kind of get that catchment from the provinces that have been giving me support.
Okay.
And that's really to test that market and see if I now go on the next step of going into those provinces.
Okay, no, that's great. It looks like it's really made a difference, and it's also taken you a step further to your expansion strategy. So
Yes.
maybe and in saying that, then, and you've walked quite a journey now with your business, I think we can say it's no longer a startup. You are well on your way.
Yes.
What one piece of advice would you give to the ladies on the webinar now, who might be in a much earlier stage in their journey? Yes, just one piece of advice from a woman entrepreneur. What would you say they must always keep in mind?
So I think it's similar to what I shared on the video. We all look for the perfect time to start, and there is no perfect time to start. It will never come. The perfect time comes with a lot of progress. So I always say, start with what you have and where you are. Start small. I mean, like I said, I started as a side hustle while I worked for corporate for 2 years, and I resigned after that because I could feel my business wanting me to grow. And a lot of people will say, how do you know that, it's time for your business to grow? And I always say the business will tell you it needs to grow. And that's when I made that leap of faith, I guess, 2 years into my business, when I resigned from corporate to go full time. And now that it's growing again, to going into a retail, the retail sector, there is that fear. Another thing is that people think that entrepreneurs are not fearful, but we actually people that do it with the fear, despite the fear, and you still continue to do it. But I would say, start at the point that you are. You just need to start. The rest will follow. There's no answers on what will unfold, and you literally learn as you go.
I think that's really good advice. A lot of us wait until we're ready to take the leap into anything, and once you take the leap, you find your feet. Somehow, you have to make it
Yes.
work. Well done. And lastly, from my side, let's hear from you on what are your big plans for Denic Cabinets? Where to from here, and what is this big picture, the aspiration for your business?
Okay, so the aspiration is definitely to grow my footprint nationwide. I'm starting my first retail showroom in Pretoria, but the plan is to have one in each province, or the provinces that are looking at that are demanding our business. But also the bigger plan is to trade across the border. And we've done a couple of cross-border projects in Zambia, Lusaka, in the DRC, and in Zimbabwe. So we have seen a little demand from there. And also the plan is to go beyond the borders, where there is a lot of business actually happening.
Okay, that's great. And like I said, well, I'm really glad that you're talking about exporting, because that's one of the things that we are so passionate about, just making sure that our clients can get to a point where their goods and services go out into the world, and we shine, as a proudly South African company, a proudly South African product.
Mm.
So we really wish you well with that. And of course, we will be here to support you through that. But thank you so much for making the time to share your story today. I think it is quite useful for people to hear from not just us who sit at the desks and do the the assessments, but from somebody that's actually on the ground doing it in real life and taking the risks, making the money, taking the leap. So we really appreciate you sharing your story, and I really think a lot of people would have gotten benefit from that today. Thank you so much, and it was lovely to have you on our webinar today. Thanks, Dipo.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Aisha. So that takes us to the next slot in the webinar, and we are getting towards the end now. We've allocated time for questions and answers. We know that you probably do have quite a lot of questions. We have tried to respond to some of them on the chat, on the Q&A chat. But I'm just thinking, let me try to also take some of them here so that you can, get answers to. Some of them have been repeatedly asked. And then one of those questions that comes up a lot is, do you fund in this sector or that sector? We did say that we fund over all sectors. So there are a few exceptions, but on the whole, if your business trades in any of the industries, we do consider those. Our funding does range from 250,000 to 75 million. But where you've got transactions and projects that are actually higher in value than the 75 million, we co-fund. So we can engage with another funding partner and look at the total project, even though we will not put in 100% of what you require. It is still something that is doable. And then colleagues online from the NEF, can you perhaps let me know if there are specific questions on the chat that you would like to respond to. In the meantime, I just want to mention that on the Q&A chat, I have put down the details of one of the companies that does the funding readiness assistance. So you can have a look there, and I will in a minute put up a second one for you, so you have options as well. Let me then go through some of the questions. If you do have questions, please will you type them into the Q&A now so that we can answer your questions, because we don't want you to miss out on this opportunity. But at the same time, you can also reach out to us after the webinar for any questions that you may have. So we've put in our email address, which you can send either your queries to for the Women Empowerment Fund, or your actual applications with your supporting documents. So that is WEF, so Women Empowerment Fund, basically, at nefcorp.co.za, and that is also on the Q&A. So it's WEF at nefcorp.co.za. You can send your applications there, you can send your questions there, and we will centralize the responses and make sure that it goes to the people in the funds that are dealing with those specific businesses. So one of the questions online is they are in the tourism industry and they were interested in putting together their documents. How do they submit applications to the NEF and for us to decide what funds they qualify for? So in terms of the various funds, you will note that there are so many different funds available. There's also a couple of grant funding options. You don't necessarily need to know all of them and be familiar with them, because we will then receive your application and understand, okay, what industry does it fit into? Are there any grants that it can qualify for? And we make that assessment for you so that you get the best possible pricing for your application. And we try to, obviously blend the different instruments that we have to make sure that whatever you do get is affordable for the business. So we do have a tourism fund, and definitely we are quite active in the tourism industry. My light keeps going off because I'm sitting still for too long. So when you've got a business plan that relates to anything in the tourism sector, not just accommodation, but even tourism services or catering or anything that links to the tourism sector, then we would apply the grant funding option to that total package as well for you. And then let me ask the NEF team who would like to come in with some of the other responses to some of the questions on the chat. And please, like I said, type your questions in now if you would like responses, because we are taking them in real time as we go along. We will also be sending through the presentation. And the recording will also be made available. So if you have missed some of the webinar, or you've got people that you would like to share it with, I know there were some challenges with some parties getting into the webinar. You're welcome to just share. They can watch the whole webinar on the link, and then we'll also send through the slides, so you won't miss out on any of the information. Okay, NEF team, who would like to come in? Lindiwe, please come in.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to the audience for the questions. I'd just like to address a couple for the Rural Fund. With regards to primary agriculture, we just like to emphasize that our funding does not include the equipment, the acquisition of primary agricultural land that we would direct towards the land bank, purely because they've got a better understanding of that particular sector, but we can assist with funding of top structures in the sense of the hatcheries, the feeding lots, so we can do all the top structures, as well as acquisition of equipment. The other question I want to attend to, GC, if you'd allow me, is the one of market facilitation. How do we assist our investees to gain access to markets? So with all our investee clients, we do partner them up with other investees. To make an example of this, if you have a sofa manufacturing company, you're manufacturing the sofas and you're outsourcing your logistics to get to your various clients, we can then partner you up with an associated logistics company that we've funded in the past, and we try to create linkages between the value chain in that way. We also are in communication with the department, the DTIC. They've got a similar program in mind with access to some of our investees, as well as those across at the IDC. So they do have a further reach with regards to market facilitation, but it works in a similar manner where they do partner you up. They do arrange meetings with various market participants and introduce you to those participants, but then it is up to you to put your best foot forward. We can't force them to take on your services, but we do assist in facilitating those introductory meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindiwe. Yes, those are important points to cover, and that relates to our Rural and Township Community Fund. Can I ask the other ladies as well to please come in with some of the responses? Then I see that there's questions around, just quickly, it's loading here for me. There was a question around, do we fund one holding company that's involved in different industries? Yes, we can look at that. That's not a problem. We would have to look at the structure of the group and understand, the synergies between the companies, but it isn't, you're not limited to say you have to be funded within one sector. How does one become a service provider for BDS services or mentorship? I'm assuming BDS, you're referring to business development or mentorship support. Okay. This is a question more for people that are service providers to the NEF itself. We have a mentorship panel and also a couple of other panels, so back office as well, where someone will assist you to prepare your management accounts and your financial statements as a service that the NEF provides to our clients at our cost. It's not internal NEF staff, it's actually external consultants. And every couple of years, we advertise that panel. So when the panel is advertised, and I'm not sure at this point when the next panel will be advertised, but you are welcome to apply for that if you have a consulting company that does provide accounting services or business mentorship services or even business turnaround services. So that relates to you then supporting the various investees on the NEFs in the NEF's portfolio. Nomfundo and Simosini, would you like to come in with anything while I go through some other questions?
I think I can come in, Karishma. Thank you. On a question asked by Yela Tor, I think it relates to Sin Industries, and that we've funded franchises that offer alcohol as part of their product offering. And she's, well, the company manufactures alcohol-infused ice cream. And just to answer that, and yes, you'd find that some of the franchises that we fund have a component of sales that is alcohol, but that is not what the business does solely. It's just an addition to the offering in terms of dining, etc. And therefore, I think it would be difficult for us to actually fund a business that actually manufactures products that have alcohol in them. I think those are would be classified as part of the Sin Industries. As you would have seen, we said taverns, bottle stores. I think the majority of the line items or the revenue mix would then be alcohol, and therefore we wouldn't participate in that, unfortunately. Thanks, Karishma.
Thanks, Nomfundo. Yeah, it's a tricky one, but unfortunately, there's some limitations. So thanks for that response. So there was another question on the chat. I'll allow the hands in a second. Let me just take this one. It says, do we provide support for electricity issues such as load shedding and basically alternative energy? We actually do have a fund specifically for that. So when you apply for funding and you do require some backup power, or even, to convert your business to solar or whatever the case may be, yes, we do have a fund for that, and it is quite concessionary. So that funding is available across the board. Let me take Zetu first.
Thank you, Karishma. I'll take two questions, one regarding the bad credit and purchasing of property. Let's start with bad credit. The short answer to that is yes. But having said that, we then need to look at what has caused the bad credit, and can you incur further debt with that credit that you, with your current credit status? For example, we'll look at, is it loans? How did you get there? Is it a problem of not repaying? Was there an issue? So we'll look into all of that before we can make our decision. So I would then suggest that you go ahead, and because it's a free service, you go ahead and you apply, and then you do that assessment, and then you can get your response. That's the first one. Then secondly, on the purchasing of property and time frames, we are trying to streamline our processes to meet clients' needs in general. But with things like properties, we would suggest that you come to us immediately as you get your OTP, because at least you are able to lock in the seller for a certain period of time. And this can also give us time to do our processes. So immediately when you settle the OTP, come back to us, because whoever the seller is will be locked into this transaction for however long the offer to purchase says they should be locked in. Thank you.
Thank you, Zetu, for those responses. Let's take Lindiwe.
Thank you. I'd like to come in for two additional questions. There's a question with regards to letters of intent to prove market, as well as one about geographical locations. The first one with regards to proving market access as well as the marketability of your product. We do accept letters of intent in the initial phase. During our due diligence process, what we'd do is then contact the various providers of the LOIs to see if it is convertible into a contract that we can place reliance on for our revenue figures. And in our experience, we do find once we've reached out on that level, most suppliers or clients are willing to contract at that advanced DD stage. So upon initial application, yes, we will look at letters of intent, but we will verify them. With regards to the Rural and Township Development Fund, there's a question on whether various areas would qualify. So with this fund, we're targeting areas predominantly outside of the big 8 metros. So if you're operating outside of Johannesburg, Cape Town, eThekwini, Pretoria, Ekurhuleni, if I'm not mistaken, the big 8 metros in South Africa, any area outside of that, whether it's a rural area or a township area, it will qualify for the RTCDF Rural SME Fund, but we will assess that at the application stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindiwe. Thank you so much. Let's take Simosini next.
Thank you, Karishma. There was a question on whether the NEF funds the exportation of South African beauty products to Asia and the Middle East. Yes, we do fund exports. We actually like export. Maybe you can unpack on the nature of assistance you need. And then there was also another question regarding reapplying if the funding was declined. So you need to ensure that the reasons for the decline have been modified. So if you've gone back and updated your application and changed a few things, then you are welcome to reapply after that. Thanks.
Yes, that's a good point, the one about declines. Thanks, Simo. Was that all from you?
Yes, thank you for now, Karishma.
Okay. I must just point out that we do get a huge number of applications every single month. We really sift through a lot of applications, but we do respond to you. If your application doesn't meet the criteria and we can see that it will not be successful for funding, we do decline, but in our decline, we will give you reasons. And those reasons usually go into the detail and they will give you a very clear sense of the parts of the business plan that you need to work on for you to come back and successfully apply. So there's no limitation on, how many times you can come back. Once you are declined, you can come back with the same idea if you've polished your business plan, if you've addressed some of the issues. It might be something to do with own contribution. It might be something to do with your market, whatever the case may be, but we will give you that guidance in the decline letter so that when you go back, those are the things that you should focus on when you come back. So please don't be discouraged by that, because we also don't want to waste your time taking you to committees and things like that where you will get pushed back because it doesn't meet the criteria. So go back, work on it, and do come back when you are ready. And then we're also very happy to sort of explain, the rationale behind some of the decisions so that you can really understand where we're coming from, and for us to even give you guidance to say, okay, rather consider this and not that. But also the consultants that, could help you, can also help you just to address those specific areas of your business. Like you may have something, for example, access to market that you're struggling with, things like that, But we do try to assist our clients with things like that when they're in the portfolio: access to markets, access to networks, and also export support and export readiness. So there's a lot of different ways in which we try to support you to make sure that you are successful in whatever you do. There's a question around, do we fund yellow equipment? Yes, we do. That is something that we would definitely look at. A manufacturing company that deals with producing health remedies, especially remedies that contain alcohol. The issue is not if a product contains alcohol necessarily, because a lot of products contain alcohol, including medication, and that's fine. We do fund those. It's about funding sin industries, so the production of alcohol for recreational consumption, kind of, but we do fund products, manufacturing of products that contain alcohol, as one of the, and the medication in particular, we have funded businesses like that. Let me quickly go through the others. I see more questions are coming in. Do we fund amusement parks or theme parks? Those are commercial type property development. So we would fund developers who want to develop those, because they also are quite a big job creator. And then student accommodation. Yes, we do have, we funded quite a few transactions in the student accommodation space. It is something that we don't mind doing. We also partner with NHFC and other institutions, so that we sometimes co-fund. Okay, this question. My question is, do you fund the dreams and potential of businesses that are still in the early stages, or only those that are already generating profit? So I'm going to ask Simo to respond to the question. There are various funding stages or business stages that we do consider. Early stage, in terms of just having an idea, that's one thing. Startup businesses where you don't have an existing business, that's another. And then you have existing businesses. So I'm going to ask Simo to just come in on some of the, on that particular topic of at what business stage can we start looking at your funding?
Thank you, Karishma. So the NEF does have funding for product development, which is where you fall in. We do fund feasibility studies and bankability studies and take you to financial close. The nice thing about this funding is that it's usually in the form of equity or quasi-equity. So you don't have to worry about having to repay the loan if the outcomes of the study are not successful or positive. So you are welcome to submit that. And we do understand that the business plan for that specific application will not be thorough because it's still early stages. But we do help you with that and packaging it for our internal committees, appointing service providers that are strongly skilled in the specific sector to help you build the business case and get it to commercial viability.
Thanks, Simo. So I guess that answers your question, but also to say you don't have to have an existing business that's generating profits, because we do look at startups. So you're not bound, and we're not saying you must come with an operational business. Zetu, you can come in.
Thank you, Karishma. I see this one has been responded to. I just want to add on to it. The question that says, do we fund the purchase of yellow machine? As Nomfundo has said, yes, we do. But I just want to add, similarly to how a bank would finance your vehicle, we fund this and we disperse in terms of an instrument called a suspensive sale, which means essentially the assets would have to be registered in the name of the NEF up until such a time our facility has been repaid in full. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thanks there too. Perfect. Purchase order funding. Yes, there's a question around purchase order funding on construction. Yes, you can apply for purchase order funding in any of the sectors, as long as your purchase order is issued by a reputable, institution. And it's something that, yes, we will definitely consider. How important is own contribution? So as the NEF, the one market failure that we are trying to address is the fact that there's not necessarily the availability of own contribution in every business. So there are times where you will find entrepreneurs coming to you where there isn't a lot of own contribution. And we do consider that. So we aren't like the bank where we have a definite percentage that you have to bring in if you want funding. But remember, we then have to find a way to make the transaction viable or more commercially sound. The reason I say that is because the whole purpose of own contribution is to reduce the amount of debt that you put into your business. So the reason why it's usually requested is because if you put some of your own money in, then the loan that is put in is limited to the balance. If you don't put anything in, then your business is funded purely by loans. It becomes very difficult then for the business to actually repay that loan because the debt burden is very high. So you always have to be trading at a certain level and making enough money to pay back the high debt burden, which won't necessarily be there if you have some equity that you put in. But in saying that, we do acknowledge that there is a lack of own contribution. So we will then try to see how we can match that facility with maybe some grant funding or some concessionary funding with very low interest rates, so that we can make the transaction work. And that will result in the numbers showing us that there is affordability. So I think that's really how we look at it. So we don't we don't put up a wall because there isn't availability of own contribution. And you also then need to show, that level of commitment in ensuring that you are committed to the business. You have put in time and effort to make sure that you get it to a certain point and that we can then invest in that business. Okay, let me see what else we have, but I'm also going to say that please feel free to send your queries to the email address that I mentioned. Or Zé, did you have something else you want to add?
Thank you, Karishma. I just wanted to attend to a question that speaks about, do we fund a business where the investee is full-time employed? We require our investees to be operationally involved in the business. That's the basic, but we would have to then ask questions such as, what kind of a business is this? Does it need you to be operationally involved if you have a business and you are in full-time employment? But the starting point is, if you are an investee, you must be operationally involved in the business. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a very important one. And I mean, really the reason for this requirement is just because we need the owner of the business to be as committed as we are, because we are putting in large amounts of capital into the business. So we do need to show that level of commitment. I wouldn't say though that you need to leave your job and then start applying for funding and all of that, because you're going to take on that risk. If you are employed and you are looking for funding, then try to link your period of employment to the time that it will take for you to conclude your transaction, so that you can seamlessly move from one position into the next. Otherwise, you may find yourself resigning too early, and then your business is not fully set up yet, or whatever the case may be. And really goes to the fact that it is very difficult to run a business profitably when you are engaged in full-time employment somewhere else. And it may be okay to do it when you don't have a debt burden, but once you start injecting debt into the business to fund it and expand, it becomes very difficult for you to do both. So I would say yes, yeah, we do need personal operational involvement rather. Okay, I think there's not a lot of things on this chat that I can say we don't do. So a lot of people ask, do we fund this and do we fund that? Generally speaking, the answer to those questions is yes. The ones that have been highlighted are the ones that perhaps are problematic, but other than that, generally the answer is yes. We've talked about own contribution. We've talked about we haven't really talked about security, and I want to just mention that. So that often when you apply to one of the banks for funding, you would need to have tangible security in terms of having a property that they can take a bond over, whatever the case is. We do actually understand that a lot of people don't have that access to collateral. So we do make provision for transactions that don't have tangible security. It is important, and it will be great if you do have it, because it does help you to be in a more secure position, but it isn't a prerequisite. So we are really trying to plug the gaps where we know entrepreneurs struggle with finance because of certain obstacles. Those are the obstacles that we're actively trying to remove so that you can access finance, so that you can get the opportunities that you're looking for. So everything is really a conversation, and you just need to engage us if there's something in particular that you want to suggest. We are quite open. I just hope this webinar also just gives you the sense that the NEF is approachable, that we are accessible, and please, we welcome engagement with you. I think I'm going to stop there. We've taken quite a lot of the questions, and I think we won't get to the end of it because I'm sure they'll keep coming. So I think I'm going to stop there. You please do reach out to us and engage. I'll take Lindiwe's hand and as the last hand, and then we'll close.
Apologies, GC. I just wanted to mention, I see a lot of guests online asking where they can direct their questions to. Can we just resend that email address as well as direct them to our pre-investment unit to assist them with any further questions that they may have not been answered during this session? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So the email address that we mentioned previously is wef@nefcorp.co.za. Behind me, you can actually see the number for the NEF. So if you look at the screen here, you will see that there is a contact number for the NEF. If you do want to have a conversation with someone, you can call that number and ask to speak to any of the product advisors at pre-investment. They'll be able to help you. But we also make provision for walk-in clients. So if you just want to come through and have a chat with one of the product advisors, you're welcome to do that. We are at 70 Grayston Drive in Sandton. But, you know, don't be bound by that, because you can call from anywhere in the country. You know, we've also got regional offices. So even if you're not in Joburg, you can still access our regional offices. And at the end of the presentation, I think it's the last slide, we also made note of all those details, so that all the regional offices' contact details are there. Our general office line is there. You can come in to our office at 70 Grayston, or you can email wef@nefcorp.co.za. So I'm hoping that through any of those channels, it does assist you to find the answers that you're looking for. And on that note, I am going to bring the session to a close. I think it was really great that we had so much engagement on the chat. Apologies for not allowing questions to be raised verbally, but it was going to be difficult to manage with the time that we had. So I really hope that today's session has given you all the information that you need, and that you are now more inspired to take your businesses forward and to take the leap and apply for funding. And please do engage with us. We are open for business. We are open to you, to serve you, and we really are hoping to see a lot more women applying for funding and entering, you know, all the various sectors. So the Women Empowerment Fund is there. Please make use of it. And we wish you all the best with your businesses, and we wish you all the success. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending and for your time.